Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for National NISLA's Office Hours Audiology Externships event. National NISLA's Office Hours is a live event series designed to bring students and professionals together to talk about topics that are relevant and important to current students. My name is Haley Carrasco, and I serve as National NISLA's Vice President for Programming in Speech Language Pathology. I'm a first-year SLP student at the University at Buffalo. I'd like to introduce our moderator for tonight and my executive council partner, Katie.
Thanks, Haley. My name is Katie Kingsbury, and I serve as National NISLA's Vice President for Programming and Audiology. I'm a third-year audiology and PhD student at the University of Iowa, and I'll be monitoring any questions that you guys ask throughout the night, which should be done through the Q&A feature, which is in the Zoom bar. So make sure to keep those questions out of the chat and in that Q&A feature.
Thanks, Katie. At National NISLA, we understand that applying and interviewing for audiology externships is rewarding yet long and sometimes difficult process. Between crafting resumes and cover letters and preparing for interviews, applicants can find themselves feeling overwhelmed. National NISLA wanted to offer a way for students in the externship application process to seek advice from professionals who have firsthand experience. During tonight's office hours, we'll hear from audiologists from various settings who have experience on the hiring side of the externship process. Although we've developed a few questions for the panelists, this event is meant to be an open discussion, so please ask any questions via the Q&A feature found on your Zoom bar. You can also feel free to add comments via the chat. We're very fortunate to have a panel of professionals who can take the time out of their busy schedules to help us prepare for the audiology externship application process. And with that, I'd like to introduce our panel of professionals. Please introduce yourselves, including your discipline and place of employment. Let's start with Natalie.
Hi, everyone. My name is Natalie Lenzen. I'm an audiologist and manager in audiology at Boys Town National Research Hospital in Omaha, Nebraska. My role is about 50% patient care, 50% administrative. And in patient care, I work with people and families across the lifespan. And I provide ABR services, amplification, and general diagnostic services as well. And part of my role is to coordinate the externship program at our hospital.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jonathan McHale, and I am a clinical audiologist. I'm the owner of Area Hearing and Speech Clinic in Joplin, Missouri. And I'm also adjunct faculty at both Wichita State and Missouri State University. Clinically, I'm mainly on the pediatric side, a lot with oral rehabilitation, especially for cochlear implant patients. Do a little bit of hearing aids on the pediatric side, but a lot with auditory processing disorders. And I am also the director of our residency program at the clinic.
Hi everyone, my name is Sierra Morrow. I am a pediatric clinical audiologist at the Medical University of South Carolina, which is located in Charleston. I recently got hired on less than a year ago, so I am new to the audiology professional world, but my clinical interests include pediatric diagnostics, neurodiagnostics, hearing aids, bone-anchored hearing devices, and then I also do vestibular imbalance testing.
Hi, everyone. I'm Charlotte Mullen. I am a pediatric audiologist at Boston Children's Hospital, obviously in Boston, Massachusetts. I do a full range of diagnostic testing, kids of all ages, as well as older individuals with intellectual disabilities, for whom a pediatric setting is perhaps a more appropriate place for them to be seen and evaluated. I am also the specialty audiologist for education and training. So I oversee our externship program, as well as placement for students earlier in their training. I'm also adjunct faculty at a local college with undergrad students. And I'm also on the steering committee for the Audiology Clinical Education Network.
Thank you, everyone. Now let's get started. Our first topic is how to research externship opportunities. We have a few questions to get us started, but please start putting your questions on this topic into the Q&A feature. For the panel, our first question is, What advice do you have for students as they research places to apply for externships? Let's start with Natalie.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. One of the things that I think is important is to kind of do an evaluation. Think about all the factors that are otherwise important to you in the externship process and what you're looking for, and then prioritize them for yourself. So, do you want something that includes different services, pediatrics, adults? Something that's more focused. Is a geographic location the primary priority for you or your family? Is the setting the priority? Are you considering finances, moves, things like that? And you are really the only one that can answer those questions for yourself. So I would just really encourage you to do kind of a deep assessment of those things before you start with your searches on, the ACEN website, the career portals, Here Careers. Really kind of first get an idea of what is the most important thing to you. And then I think things will become clear after that.
I'm gonna
Thank you,
go ahead.
Nathan.
Do
Oh,
you want me to go ahead and go next? Perfect.
yes.
One thing that I've recognized throughout this process, especially over the last decade of working with externs, is the system has changed. When I was a student, it was you find whatever you can find. You go as fast as you can to find whatever you can find because they're going to be swept up really, really quickly. And what I encourage students now to do is focus on what you want to do, but ensure that you're still getting a well-rounded education. A place that simply just wants to put you to work is not a place to continue to learn, and you are still continuing to learn. So, are you going to be around other audiologists that are going to help you in that process to help you learn new things? Are they going to advocate for your interests as a new audiologist and create that space for you to train while also becoming a clinical audiologist?
Yeah, I would agree with all of those comments. And I think it is really important, as Natalie said, to do a little bit of soul searching as to what clinically um, hits your passion. If you don't like working with children, then certainly don't be applying for a pediatric focused placement. Um, so really thinking about not only your clinical interests, but also your personal interests and your personal leanings when it comes to working with patients and clients. Um, Sometimes students will ask, well, I think I have to apply for 10 or 12 or 15 places because I really need to get some. And, as Jonathan said, that used to be kind of the focus. And, hopefully it's slowly getting better. I think one thing to really keep in mind is there are vastly more clinical placements offering externship than there are students. So, although a certain facility may be your number one choice, and, hopefully you'll get it, if you're applying to places that all meet your professional and personal goals and needs, you will land something.
Yeah, I second and third everything that everyone has said already. I think adding on to that, when comparing specific opportunities, kind of going off of the soul searching aspect, think about what clinically interests you and what areas of audiology that you find a really good passion in. And when you're reviewing different listings, are the postings for the specific externships meeting your goals and your desires and things that you want fulfilled in your fourth year? Because it is such a great experience to just take in everything during that fourth year, because you go from being in a student role to start transitioning to that clinician role, and having all of those things listed out for you to be able to experience is going to be game changing, because you want to make sure you're having an experience that's going to be fitting your clinical interests and your clinical wants.
Thank you all so much. I think these are amazing things for people to keep in mind when they're looking for externship so that it's serving them best clinically and also just in their lifestyle. The next question is for Jonathan. How can you get an externship with a specific population or setting that you want?
Yeah, so I think part of it is like they've already talked about research that. One thing that I pride our clinic has pride in is that we want to offer everything within our scope. I see a lot of audiologists that will say a decade in, oh, I'm burnt out, but then you ask them, well, what are you doing? Oh, well, I'm only doing hearing aids, or I'm only doing vestib, but they're not doing everything. And so finding a place that is able to do everything but has audiologists that specialize in one area, maybe you're getting the overview of audiology, but you want to focus on oral rehabilitation. Well, are you going to work with an audiologist that is going to be able to get you those opportunities with oral rehabilitation? So finding where the overarching themes of audiology kind of connect together, and then being able to kind of dispense yourselves within one area is a great way to start looking at different aspects of it. We do that with research as well. We want you to be able to research, not because you were forced to do it with a capstone project, but because you have now taken akin to a specific interest. Well, how can we cultivate that within you to make your resume when you're done with us more robust? So finding someone that wants to cultivate your interests alongside with you.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. Our next question is for Dr. Mullen. How many externships do you recommend applying for?
Yeah, and again, I kind of touched on that a minute ago. I don't think there is a magic number. And as Natalie said before, I think if you're doing your homework and really thinking about not only the clinic type that you might want to be in. Do you want to be in a smaller private practice? Do you want to be in a large major medical center? But really also doing a lot of research about the area that you're applying. And, so you may have some family constraints and need to stay in a certain geographical area. And as wonderful as places like Boston and New York and LA and, other major cities are, they tend to be very expensive to live in. And, is that something that you're able to do and consider? Does the externship have a stipend that would help to support that? All of those things. So I think really doing your homework and, again, there are lots of wonderful externships out there where you will get a great learning experience. So really just taking the time to scroll through all of the postings and think about that and to talk with your family as to what they're able to consider when it comes to the financial things and helping to support you in that year.
Thank you. Our next question is for Sierra. We kind of talked about this a little earlier, but what are some things to consider when reviewing different externship listings? And what are some possible green or red flags students should consider?
Yeah, I think we've already touched a lot on what to consider when reviewing different externship listings. If you're looking for something that's maybe more pediatric focused, maybe looking at listings that really highlight, oh, this is a pediatric facility or pediatric hospital, or if you're looking for something that's maybe really vestib heavy and you're really interested in balance testing, looking for things that list out in the listing that they specifically offer that specific type of testing, things that are clinically interesting to you, I think are things that you want to be looking out for. Kind of what Charlotte already mentioned too, if you're interested in being in an externship that has a stipend, that's something to look out for. That typically is listed on the listing, but if it's not, and if it comes up during an externship interview, that's something that you may be able to talk about with the externship, the people that are offering the externship. Some possible green flags are looking for things such as if they're doing electroacoustic analysis of their hearing aids, or if they're using Verifits to verify their hearing aid fittings, things like that that are taught to us specifically during our programs, things that we like to look for um, that show that these locations are really doing the best they can for their patients. Red flags, that's a hard one because I feel like it's kind of person specific. Maybe a red flag for you is if you don't want to move across the country for an externship, you want to look for something that's a little more local. If something comes up where it's like, hey, I don't have the opportunity to move across the country, or maybe a red flag is you're seeing that maybe it's a little extra heavy in a specific area that you're not very interested in. That would be like a specific red flag, I think, would be to something to look out for. That's a little more personable.
Thank you so much, Sierra. Katie, do we have any questions to share from our audience?
We got this question ahead of time, but I felt like this was a great question to ask Natalie, kind of knowing your background and where you're coming from and your hospital. So if students have interests in both clinical opportunities as well as some research opportunities, are these options available to students and maybe how could they go seeking them out?
Yeah, I think there's a few different options there. I know some hospitals and sites offer a more kind of structured experience that explicitly states if you're choosing a all clinical externship or if your externship also has a research component. Um, that is something that we offer and have been probably for the past 5 years or so. And that has been something that students, especially those who may have an interest in becoming a research audiologist or continuing on with their PhD, or just really enjoy that aspect of their AUD education, have really taken advantage of that. And I know that there's other externships and programs that may have something that's formally set up. There may also be opportunities for research projects as you talk with the professionals at the different externship sites. And I think that is a great, as we're kind of foreshadowing a little bit, a great question to ask during your interviews. And as you're talking with potential sites, what opportunities are there for research? Is it encouraged? Is there release time for it? Is that something you do on your own time? I think if that's important to you and of interest, then add that to your list.
Great. Thank you so much. When I saw this, I was like, I knew you're going to be the person to ask. One of our next questions we have from the audience, we are kind of talking about how are we balancing, okay, we want a well-rounded externship experience, but this person has a really specific interest. They said, what should maybe considerations be if our area of interest is pretty niche, such as interoperative monitoring? How would you maybe recommend they balance getting a well-rounded externship experience, but also considering post-grad job potential? So really, okay, how are we balancing some of these maybe really specific interests we have with also knowing that the job market flexible and maybe that's not what we get into? So would anyone on the panel like to take this question?
I'll take a little bit of a jump at it. Again, if somebody's specifically interested in intraoperative monitoring, then you're going to need a medical center. Again, what kinds of surgical procedures are they doing? Some places are now doing more remote monitoring. Some places, the audiologist will place the facial electrodes, the facial nerve monitoring, but yet one of the ENT residents is the one that actually is in the room doing it. So again, just kind of finding out what they do and what their audiology staff offers. And then, as a student, are you going to have time in that year to rotate through the operating suites and get some hands-on experience? Sometimes, a placement might have you just in the clinic and doing more outpatient testing and hearing aids and CI mapping and all of those kinds of things, and not allow their externs and their students to go into the operating room, but others may actually have it built into their rotation. So again, looking at the listings, how is it worded out, and asking those specific questions.
Great, thank you so much. I think that was a really great answer. And kind of, we put some links in the chat for the ASIN network, Here Career, and kind of to what Dr. Mullen was alluding to. In a lot of those listings, they'll provide examples of maybe what skills you're going to be doing more often than other. So I'd really encourage you as students when those applications start, or I mean, those listings start popping up, really look at maybe what skills they say, oh, you're going to be doing this often or never or daily. So that can be really helpful if you have specific interests, trying to narrow down like, okay, maybe about realistically how much would I be doing these skills. So we're going to shift on to our next section, but thank you all so much for the great questions in the chat. We'll get to some of them soon.
Yes, so we'll be moving on to what to do with your resume. Please start putting the questions on this topic in our Q&A feature. Our first question is for Dr. Mullen. What experiences do you look for on a strong resume?
And that's a little tricky one because a lot of the resumes of students applying for externship are going to look very similar. You've had similar clinical experiences. Many universities require you to volunteer with Special Olympics and certain things like that. So, I know I certainly look at what other kinds of experiences have you had? Were you part of a mission trip to another country? Have you done other community outreach types of programs? Um, um, those kinds of things. So, what things that maybe you have done that were a little bit unique, or did you seek out a placement that had something that wasn't just a routine clinical skill, something that was a little bit more unusual? We've certainly had students apply who have done the summer research at Boys Town, things like that. Have you worked on research projects? Have you had some poster presentations or publications or podium presentations at one of the professional meetings? Those are the kinds of things that might set you apart from someone else.
Thank you. And jumping off of how to set yourself apart from others, this question is for Natalie. What are some of the most important components or sections that students should highlight on a resume?
Yeah, great question. To kind of jump off of what Dr. Mullen was saying, there is a lot of similarities when we're looking at these CVs. Students are doing amazing things. We all joke that none of us would ever get an externship if we tried applying today because all of these students are so fantastic and are so involved in so many things. But to start to kind of differentiate or at least make your CV really clear and easy to read, I love to see specific clinical experiences at your rotations. So rather than saying, this pediatric hospital, I want to see observed this, assisted with, performed this, and be very clear about what your role was with patient care. Observing is not a negative. I wouldn't not include it because a lot of your role was observing. That is still a lot of important exposure. And if that's an interest of yours, for example, if it's a pediatric observation that you did, then that's really important to include if you want to pursue a pediatric externship. Um, Kind of building off of that, I love a very clear and organized CV, and I love me some sections. So your education component, your clinical rotations, presentations, poster presentations, publications, if you have any research experiences, including if your program requires a capstone, what specifically is your capstone? You may be working in that lab, but also highlight what is the capstone that you're working on. All of those amazing volunteer activities, um, mission trips, as Dr. Mullen said. And then surprisingly, people have time to sometimes work and to find other things outside of audiology that they're doing. And we like to see that too. And it tells us a little bit about some of our students. For example, we had one student who had a job painting the dog biscuits at a dog biscuit bakery. And when we interviewed her, we had to know about that experience. We had to know, is she the best, dog biscuit painter out there? So, yeah, it gives you an opportunity to also highlight yourself too.
Thank you so much. Our next question is for Jonathan. How do you address the lack of experience on a resume?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think everyone would say we anticipate a lack of experience because you're looking to gain experience. We do a couple of things in our office specifically. The first thing I focus on is your transferable skills. What do you have? How do you interact with patients? I can teach you audiology. Our audiologist can teach you audiology. I want to see what can you do in front of that patient. Also, how are you willing to take that criticism, or how do you manage your time? What is your writing skills like when it comes to report writing? If you have an interest in research, what does that writing look like? One thing we do in our office that we've started over the last 10 years is an audition rotation. So if we would do a formal interview with you, usually via Zoom or something like that, we'll bring you in for a week where we'll pay for you to come to our office, and we'll watch you and observe you over the week to see if you're going to be a good fit for us, to see if that is going to, if those skills that we want to help transfer onto you, you're able to be moldable with those things. So that's something that we've begun to implement. We expect a lack of experience, but we want to see that you are willing to be moldable and just kind of be clay with us as we continue to sharpen your audiological skills.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. I think that sounds really interesting, bringing them in to get to see how they work in the clinic. Our next question is for Sierra. How do you tailor your resume for different positions?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Kind of going off what everyone else has already mentioned, if you are interested in a very specific like field of audiology, such as maybe pediatrics or cochlear implants or something like that, highlighting those sections on your resume can be really important to help you stand out a little bit. And maybe if you're focused on a like a position that's primarily working with cochlear implants, it's good to showcase that you did have experience in other aspects of audiology, but really highlight the important aspects that are going to be tailored towards that externship. If you're really focused on pediatrics and you've had experience with specific types of manufacturers, pediatric manufacturers, or pediatric specific testing, maybe highlight those things on your resume. And I think it's good to show that you have a well-rounded experience as a student on any application and all of your resumes that you're sending out. But if you want to really stand out on those specific applications for those externships that you have more of an interest in, it's good to highlight those very specific parts of the resume of your resume that'll help you stand out.
Thank you so much. And this next question is for the entire panel. Is there anything you recommend students not include on their resume?
I'll take a leap at this one too. I think, sometimes you have to be careful about like high school jobs that you had. That's already ancient history. Unless it happens to be applicable to the externship you're applying for. So, again, using pediatrics as an example, if you were a camp counselor or spent, your summers as a nanny for young kids or something like that, that would be applicable because it shows that understand children and working with children and interacting with kids. But, if you worked at the Baskin Robbins scooping ice cream, that's great. But, it's not particularly applicable. Although, as someone else mentioned, too, seeing that someone has been working, especially through graduate school, that shows me you've got a lot of good time management skills. If you can juggle, whether it's being a server in a restaurant or whatever, that certainly would be appropriate to add.
Thank you so much. Katie, do you have any questions from the audience?
So we're having some questions from students that are maybe in undergrad or in the first or second year of their AUD journey. And so they're maybe not at the point of crafting the resume yet for the externship, but they want to know, okay, maybe what experience should I start looking for if I'm interested? This person specifically is asking about pediatrics, but maybe what as a first or second year student or undergrad student should they start considering getting involved in to put on that resume? We'll open this up to anyone if they want to take a stab at it.
I can start. This was required in my graduate program, but we did a lot of school hearing screens, and that was really good practice as a student to work on those conditioned play audiometry skills while working with those kindergartners and those preschoolers. If you are interested in pediatrics, I would suggest if your graduate program does not already offer school hearing screens to see if that could be an opportunity, maybe as just a volunteer opportunity or maybe part of a clinical rotation where you can add that experience to your resume.
I would also encourage students to arrange shadowing opportunities, especially if, say you're going to a university in one state, but you want to head back home afterwards. Maybe you shadow somewhere where you could potentially see yourself in a future externship, see if they have any opportunities. And I think it's always valuable to get an idea of what a true day-to-day looks like of an audiologist in the area that you're interested in working in, because you can observing a day in the clinic can open your eyes to a lot of things that you might really love and some things that you may not enjoy as much. And so you may want to look at other areas too. So that kind of firsthand experience is pretty invaluable.
Thank you so much. We have one other question, and that is, what is the difference between a CV and a resume, and how can students navigate what to highlight on each? Um, Charlotte, would you like to take this one?
I'm not sure I'm the best to answer this one. My understanding of the difference is really a CV will include things like research opportunities and that kind of thing, whereas a resume may be more just sort of general. If you were applying for any kind of a job, you might use more of a resume and not, you wouldn't include research that you've done or specific things. You might not add coursework, or if you've been a TA for a particular faculty member, things like that. So, but please correct me if I'm wrong.
All right,
Perfect.
thank you.
Alexis just dropped a really helpful link in the chat that can guide that. And also, I just encourage you all to consider really read that listing closely. If they say they're asking for a resume of a certain length, it's a good idea. Okay, I'm going to do that 2-page resume. That's what they asked for. If they ask for a CV or something longer, that gives you a little more guidance, maybe what they're looking for. So, really make sure we're following kind of the instructions of what we're given. I know it sounds basic, but it can be tempting to be like, well, I have all this great experience. Maybe I'll just like add a little longer. I'd recommend like really follow what they're asking for. I think that's a good skill of showing like, hey, I can follow instructions. I'm really looking at the listing closely. So I would follow that link in the chat if you're looking for more guidance as well.
Yes, thank you. And we will now be moving on to talking about how to write a strong cover letter. Please start putting your questions on this topic into the Q&A feature. So our first question is for Dr. Mullen. Do you need a cover letter?
I would say absolutely yes. It's your way of, in a slightly less formal way, introducing yourself, your interests, what has led you to apply at that particular location, with that particular facility. Um, and again, it can sometimes, a lot of times students will put in, my sister has hearing loss. And so I've, spent my entire childhood going to her audiology appointments and learning about her hearing aids and things like that. How did you kind of come to the field of audiology? things like that. So I think absolutely you want to make sure that you have a well-written cover letter. Really shouldn't exceed a page. You should be able to get everything you want on a page. And the other thing, students have to be super, super careful. We've all gotten kind of lazy with spell check and grammar check and things like that. But there are a lot of words that you can type that are a real word, and spell check won't get it. And I tend to, when I see errors on a cover letter, I circle them because it shows a lack of attention to detail. So, make sure you read it, reread it, maybe have Word read it out loud to you, give it to your mother, your sister, your roommate, whomever, have them read it, make sure that everything is correct in there.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I feel like that kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier about making yourself stand out. So putting in those personal experiences really like highlights it for you. I think that's amazing. Our next question is for Jonathan. What makes a cover letter stand out for better or for worse?
Certainly what Dr. Mullen said. I guarantee you I have missed good candidates because I'm looking at cover letters and or CV resumes, and there's so many spelling issues or grammatical issues. And I'm a writing guy, so I make everybody in all of my classes write. Because I believe that in order to understand what you know, I want you to in depth write about that. So one thing I look for is I don't need something too over the top, but I want to get to know you a little bit. I want this to be more of that, as Dr. Mullen said, that informal introduction to who you are. Capture my attention with telling me how you got here, why audiology, and then let the CV do the talking after. And that's how I go about that process. Keep it simple. Don't make some crazy design. No, we don't need that. We just want to be able to get to know you in a little bit more of an informal way, and then we'll move on to the formal stuff when we get to that CV resume there.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. Would anyone else on the panel like to add what they think on this topic of what would stand out on a cover letter for better or for worse?
Yeah, I really agree with what Jonathan and Dr. Mullen had to say about the cover letter. One area I think that you can utilize it is to highlight something on your CV that you may not have enough, that the CV doesn't entirely do it justice. So especially if you can tie it back into the place that you're applying and why you might be interested in that place. I think that that can serve you well and go a long way. The other thing that we're always wanting to know is why. Why our externship in the middle of Nebraska? Why do you want to pursue this? If you want to do a clinical and research externship, why is that so important to you? And again, it helps us just get to know you even just through that piece of paper.
I want to add just a few more things on top of all the great things that everyone have already mentioned. When writing cover letters, sometimes it may be a very similar template from application to application. Make sure that you are highlighting the correct placement for the correct application. There have been many times that I have seen cover letters that have the wrong location that is clearly printed for the application. So just make sure, again, proofread, proofread, proofread the entire application, the entire cover letter. Make sure you have a lot of eyes on it before you submit it.
I think that is some sage advice. So I love that. Another question we have is kind of talking about you want to get to know students a little more. I feel like I've heard this from a lot of classmates and other students in the field. What advice do you maybe have for approaching a cover letter if you don't feel like you have a super personal story or personal connection to the field? I think we have all experienced that. We're like, well, my friend has this super personal story about why they came to audiology. So, what advice would you have for students and how to navigate that in their cover letter?
Go ahead, Natalie.
I was going to say, I actually am more of a fan of kind of the classic 5-point essay style of a cover letter. Sometimes I get lost in some of the stories. So sometimes I like to hear about, I'm qualified or I'm interested in this externship for these 3 reasons. I'm going to expand on those reasons. And I'm going to follow up with how excited I am to talk to you about this. So if you don't have, that moving personal story that kind of brought you to audiology, or that you can share in your cover letter, you've had other experiences that you can tie into why you're pursuing what you want to be pursuing. And then I'm sure you have amazing patient examples to talk about when you get to that interview portion.
And I was going to add, maybe there's a faculty person that you had either as an undergrad or, early on in your graduate training, who really sparked your interest in audiology. I know way back in the day when I went through school, um, I went to grad school for speech language pathology, and happened to take the wrong audiology course, and it changed my life. And I dropped speech pathology and stayed with audiology. So, maybe you've got a story like that, a professor that, just really piqued your interest in the field. Or, maybe there was an opportunity, as Sierra said, that you had done some hearing screenings as an undergrad or something like that, had some other experience that led you to it rather than, yeah, the sort of family kind of history story.
Thank you all so much. Katie, do you have any questions from the audience?
We got some of this in our pre-registration, but kind of we've touched on this a little bit, but would anyone on the panel like to expand on the idea of editing our cover letter? Do you have any resources or possibly steps that you recommend students follow when they've written that cover letter and now they're at the point they're like, okay, I'm at the editing and revising stage. Do you have any advice that you like to give students? Jonathan, do you want to touch on this or anyone else on the panel?
Yeah, I can. I jokingly tell people there were 2 years that I had no idea what I was going to do with my life, so I got a master's degree in technical writing. So as long as you're not applying to my externship, you can send it to me and I'll absolutely edit it for you. I'm happy to do that. I like Grammarly. Utilize, nobody even knows these places exist. Utilize your university writing center. They are wonderful. I still, even before I submit an article that I'm publishing to peer-reviewed journals, will send it to some of my people at our writing facilities and have them review it before I do it. They will do it for you, and it's usually free of charge. So that's a great way. But like I said, I'm always here to help any student anytime they potentially need anything.
To add to that, on top of the Writing Center, the Career Center is also a facility at universities that can offer not only um, reviewing of cover letters and the formality of a cover letter, but also resumes as well. They can look over your resumes and make sure formality is looking good and typos are looking good. So, yes, second, all of your resources at your university.
I love that advice. It's like, okay, students, we're paying a lot for this education. How are we getting the most out of our money? I would also recommend, having gone through this, ask your faculty members, would any of them be comfortable reviewing it? Maybe you have an externship coordinator that'd be comfortable reviewing it at your program. And within like kind of the career center, maybe you have a designated CSD person. I know at my undergraduate university we did. So try to collect more information. Okay, is there someone who's maybe more specialized to really help me with it? General information is great, but we know we're kind of a little different than maybe who someone's that's applying for a business job or an engineering role. So really search out, is there anyone specific that can help you really hone your material to what the field is looking for as well. So thank you all for that great advice. I think we're going to shift on to our next topic.
Yes, we will now be discussing how to stand out during your interview. If anyone has questions about interviews in particular, please start putting them in the Q&A feature now. So, our first question will be for the whole panel. What are the best interview tips for students applying for externships?
So maybe if everyone wants to just give like their one tip, we'll go around if everyone wants to just give one tip. Do we want to start with Dr. Mullen if you'd want to go ahead?
Um, One big tip I would give, because I think, unlike Jonathan, we don't bring students on site. So all of our interviews are done via Zoom or some other similar platform. Um, Check your background. I can't tell you the number of times, you know, check your background and check your environment. We had one student one time who was on one of those large bouncy ball chair things, which I'm sure is great for your back and your core. But, through the whole interview, she was bouncing up and down, and then her cat walked through the screen. And, I've seen people walking by with plates of food and things like that. So, just try and find a place where you can close a door or you've got a a solid wall behind you or something like that, and not have other distractions in the background.
I will add to that. Even if the interview is over Zoom or a similar platform, dress your best. Even if you are not going in person, put on a nice shirt. Make sure you pull your hair back out of your face. Something to make you look very presentable. Even if it's over the internet, it can still you still want to make sure you're putting on a really good first impression.
I would encourage you to breathe. I think, especially in kind of we always do virtual interviews as well, but in kind of that virtual Zoom interview style, it's easy, I think, to let your nerves kind of take over and to just be in go mode, especially because it's hard to see the feedback from the people that you're talking to. The faces are smaller on the screen. There might be multiple people. So take a moment, take a deep breath, pause, and then answer your questions. And that will just give you a moment to recalibrate and be a little bit more present.
Yeah, I agree with all of those. So my first point is iron your shirt. Just iron it. I'm not a big ironing guy, but I would for an interview. But what I also look for is active listening. I want to see that when we present you with something, usually in our first online interview, we will present a case to you. We'll kind of see what your thoughts are. We don't even care if you talk to our audiologist, we don't even care if you get it right necessarily. We want to watch your thought process. And then when we bring you in, we want to see, are you actively listening to us as we are instructing you clinically? So those are kind of the few things that we look for when you're coming into an interview.
Thank you all so much. And I do think that one thing that was mentioned multiple times was dressing your best, like making sure that you're looking presentable. I think that's very important for any interview, especially an externship interview. Our next question is for Sierra. What are some popular interview questions that could be asked?
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel like any and all questions could be asked, whether it's related to audiology or not. You could be asked very difficult clinical questions, specifically maybe to masking or to an auditory brainstem response test, or would this patient be a cochlear implant candidate, ranging all the way to what is your favorite type of dessert and why? Or if you could travel anywhere in the world, where would you go and why? There's so many options that the interviewist panel can choose from. So I think it's good to be prepared for any and all questions. Typically, I've seen most interviews start with those more personable questions of just really getting to know you and who you are, and is your personality someone that they can jive with and someone that they get a good read from, and then they kind of roll into those more sometimes more clinical based questions. So those are most of the popular interview questions that I've encountered.
Thank you. Our next question is for Natalie. What are some good questions for an extern to ask in an interview?
Truly, any question that an extern has to ask during the interview is typically a good question. I think it kind of goes back to, again, what are your priorities and what are you most interested in that environment? What are some things that you don't have answers to or that you might not be able to get at unless you ask a specific question? So maybe asking about the department culture. Do people get along? Are externs included in, group activities, or does it seem like there's more of a separation between staff and externs? Ask about how many different audiologists you're working with. What areas have previous externs really enjoyed? What areas have maybe they struggled with or had feedback about? Um, what do you think is the best part of the externship? What do you think is the most challenging part? And ask about supervision. I think supervision is really a big sticking point and something that is variable across sites. It's variable across audiologists within the same site. So asking about what that looks like. Are you expected to carry your own schedule? Are you co-scheduled with an audiologist all the time? Are they following the correct guidelines for Medicare patients? I think those are really good areas to get a read on.
Thank you so much, Natalie. And on the flip side of that, this question is for Jonathan. What are some things that you should avoid asking during an interview?
Yeah, so I look at it in a couple of ways. One is I don't want you to be passive. I want it to be a dialogue where we're talking about it, asking those questions that Natalie just brought up, being engaged in that conversation. The other thing that I would say I would prefer if you avoid, if you've had a rotation that you did not necessarily enjoy, I don't want to hear you talk poorly about another audiologist. To me, that's unprofessional. So if that is coming into my office, that's oftentimes a little red flag for me to consider. You can say that you struggled in a rotation. We can say, hey, let's improve on this area that you felt like you struggled on, but there is a professional way to handle that. So not only is professionalism through your appearance, but also the language that you are using as part of that. So being active within the conversation, but also ensuring that the language we are using is focused on how we are going to help you sharpen your audiological skills over the next year.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. Our next question is for Dr. Mullen. What is the biggest indication for you that someone is a good fit for the position in the interview?
Again, I think, as others have said, asking, good questions. But, I also want to see that they're showing some interest in the position that they're applying for. If they're sort of sitting back and kind of they've asked a question and okay, well, now I've got four that are written down. I'm just going to move on to the next one. I want to see some enthusiasm, some interest, and someone that's easy to talk to, as Natalie said earlier, take a breath. We're all humans and, we don't want to see, an extern candidate break out in sweat and all of that. It's meant to be a dialogue so that we can learn more about you as a candidate, but that you can learn more about us as a facility and a staff and preceptors as well. So hopefully it's a pretty even give and take dialogue.
Thank you so much. Is there anyone else who would like to add something to this question of what's the biggest indication that someone is a good fit?
I just want to share one of the things that we're kind of always gauging during our interview process is, do I want to spend all day with this person? Is this somebody that on the night where I got 4 hours of sleep and I have to be at work for an OR case at 6 a.m., do I want to see that student? And do we want to work together? And is that going to be a good experience? And people may not feel that way about seeing me sometimes after 4 hours of sleep. But I think if you can share who you are, and take the opportunity you have to have conversation with the people that you're talking to, they can start to get a feel for who you are. and what it would be like to work with you on a day-to-day basis and how that whether that's a good fit for you, if you can gauge whether that place is a good fit for you, and vice versa, and both are equally as important.
Thank you so much. Our next question is for Sierra. How would you address asking about compensation?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. I would start with if compensation is listed on the application as you're applying for it, and it's something and compensation is something that you're interested in, that's great. If compensation is not mentioned and it's something that you would like to discuss during your interview process, I do think it can be appropriate to bring up and let them know that you are interested if there is any and all compensation that could be offered during the externship process or during the externship year. If it is something that they would be willing to negotiate, that could be a conversation between you and that person. If it's something that they're not willing to offer or compensate for you, maybe that's something you'd like to consider as you're moving through the interview process. If it's something that you would like to have a little bit more financial compensation for, maybe it's something to just consider a little bit more. Um, but I feel like it's okay to ask the question if there is any room for compensation during the externship year, due to the fact that you are really putting in a lot of time and effort into this year, and it's really like a full-time job. So asking the question in a manner where you're coming off in a professional sense, asking if there is any room for compensation and what compensation could look like, whether it's a stipend, whether it's a monthly payment similar to like a salary payment, biweekly payment, whatever that looks like. If that's if compensation is offered, you would be have a little more room to ask those questions as well.
Thank you so much. Katie, do you have any questions for the panel?
I think we had one previously, and I think Jonathan would be a great fit for this question. So, possibly during the interview process or even shortly after, what advice do you have for students to navigate effective ways for advocating for appropriate supervision and maybe appropriate scope within that? So, any advice you'd have for students in that interview process of kind of understanding, okay, do we feel like a good match student supervisor, maybe what their supervision style is, kind of what advice you'd have for students on that.
Yeah, that's a great question. When I was in my externship, it was I would say about 50-50. The first like half of the year I was with another audiologist. The second half they started letting me be a little bit more independent. One thing we do at our clinic is that we essentially give you a schedule of where we want you to be, essentially checking those milestones. Okay, by October, I expect you to be doing this with independence. Of course, we're always there if you need us, and then continue to build on that. So what one thing we'll always say is we always want this to be 80-20 at the start, and then we're going to slowly move that ratio the different direction. I've had students that get along better with other audiologists in our office. We're okay with that. We want you to have a great learning experience, and maybe that isn't with me. Usually, what will happen is if they want to see more of vestib stuff. I don't do vestib stuff. We have a vestibular audiologist. We'll put them with her, but if they want to come back for the research stuff, I'll do a little bit more with them on that, or maybe on the pediatric side. So again, I think what Natalie said was great. Do you want to come to work with these people every day? Are you good with that every day? If you have that with someone that you're interviewing with, or they have the luxury of having multiple audiologists that you can work with, get to know all of them. Find the specialty that you may like, and kind of hone in and just be a sponge to absorb those things. But we always tell them we won't hover, but we are always here. Come get us at any time. We will always be there for you the moment you need us. We don't want to make you nervous in that process, but we're also going to ensure that you're doing best practice. And if you need us, we're here for you at any time.
I love that. So, kind of the next question we have from someone in our Q&A is navigating how to possibly ask for contact information from previous externs. So does anyone have any advice about when this might be appropriate during the interview or kind of that informational process, and how might students navigate that?
That's something that we actually mention and offer after we kind of close out our interview is I always let them know that uh, I'll send them contact information of our current externs, and I've already checked in with the current externs beforehand. Um, when before Zoom existed, when I was applying for externs, the extern committee would literally walk down the hallway, see who was available, and throw a phone in front of one of the current externs' face and say, "Hey, talk to this student who's interviewing, and they can ask you questions." So I'm glad we don't do that anymore. Um, but a follow-up email is a great place to ask for that contact information. You could always, do a preliminary ask of, "Oh, I'd love to speak with current externs," and then follow up in a follow-up email, especially because you're typically following up to say thank you for the interview. And you can include that question there, and then it's an easy connect through email to the current externs.
Thank you so much, Natalie. And for our final set topic, we will discuss how to adapt to preceptor styles and clinical environments. After this, we'll have some time to answer any remaining questions from our audience. If you have any questions about this topic, start popping them into our Q&A feature now. So our first question will be for Natalie. What can I expect from my relationship with my preceptor and at the beginning of a rotation?
Yeah, kind of as Jonathan mentioned, we really view our role as preceptors as a person, as people of support for the externs kind of in all aspects of their time with us. So we're really interested in getting to know students as they're starting at our facility. So we do kind of a getting to know you document that we kind of like a poster that we post in our common areas where we have lunches. We have kind of the social aspects that I think are important in an office place, and then also, you know, getting to know experiences, learning styles, etc. So we make sure that, included in lunches, conversations, things like that. That's all very important. Making sure all the introductions are done because we have a lot of humans to meet and we want to make sure that people feel welcome and comfortable. But then we also want to know what has been your previous experience in your rotations? What is your preferred learning style? How do you like to receive feedback? Do you like to sit and watch? Do you prefer to be thrown under the bus right away? What are your preferences with that? And then how we're set up is we have a primary preceptor that is kind of that main contact for the student during their time with us. And they help to communicate that to the rest of the staff so that they can say, "Hey, I met with so and so. They like to receive feedback this way. Their goals for this upcoming semester are this." Um, and they can share that kind of on behalf of the student. And then I know each person that works with that student then over the course of those beginning rotations is also checking in about those things like, "Oh, I saw that you haven't had a lot of PEDS experience. Where are you at with VRA testing? What would you like to do for this appointment?" Those types of check-ins. So, and we kind of repeat that process every semester as we're starting to build more independence and starting to develop some additional skills. We just kind of repeat that and make sure that sometimes your learning style changes depending on the thing that you're working at. And we want to always have those conversations going.
Thank you, Natalie. Our next question is for Dr. Mullen. It kind of touches on some of the same things, like ensuring we're having a positive and productive learning experience. How can we proactively establish clear expectations with our preceptor at the beginning of a rotation?
Yeah, I would kind of, echo some of the things that Natalie said in how we approach things. And we meet with the extern on literally on day one to sit down and to go over all sorts of things. What are the expectations? What are your hours? Where will you sit? where's the restroom, when do you get lunch, all of those really important things. But also, what are your goals? Okay, so here's what you're going to be doing. What are your goals? Maybe it's I'm not very good at masking, so I want to really solidify my masking skills. And coming up with a timeline for how we can achieve those. So setting, usually 2 or 3 goals for we break our year into 3 rotations. Um, so I think that needs to be a conversation from day one. And so if, you know, that's a good interview question too, how does a facility approach signing preceptors and helping you meet your goals? Because you're a student and you should be treated like a student that we are teaching. I think you also have to be honest with yourself too. Some students will come in with, I know how to do this and I can do that and I can do this and I can do that. And maybe you can, but again, as Jonathan said earlier, your students, you still have another year of learning good clinical practice and following clinical practice guidelines and all of that kind of thing and really honing your skills. So and I think even those of us who have been around for a long time, there's certainly things that I'm really good at, and there's certainly things that I'm really not. And just like Jonathan, I would never touch a vestibular patient because it's not in my wheelhouse, that's for sure. So, again, just reaching out, in the interview process, and then certainly when you start at a place, okay, how am I going to be working? How can I set my goals? What are your expectations of me? And I always say to students, you're not here to show me what you know. You're here for me to show you what I know and to help impart some of, the knowledge that I have and help you to grow and learn.
Thank you, Dr. Mullen. Our next question is for Jonathan. How do you navigate a mismatch between a preceptor's feedback style and how you would like to receive feedback?
Yeah, that's a great question. Communication is such a beautiful but also fickle thing. And I am very much so one that likes to be criticized. I like to be critiqued because that's how I'm going to sharpen those skills. I'm very fortunate that I get to work with people that are way better than me and will call me out on my nonsense, which I love because I need that. Otherwise, I get complacent. One thing that we do kind of upfront, kind of like what Natalie said, we will ask you immediately, how do you like to receive feedback? Because I'll have students that go, I want to receive it in the moment. I'll have some students go, well, that embarrasses me. Could we talk about it after? Of course we can. Absolutely. We don't want to exacerbate any awkward feelings that you already have because we understand this is a highly sensitive human interaction here. So we'll ask about that. We'll talk about that. Usually at the end of every appointment, we're big into have a notebook with you, have an iPad with you, you're making notes. If you have a ton of questions while we're going, we will answer them, I promise. But as many people as we see, we've got to move quickly. We will revisit everything at the end of the appointment and go over those things. So if I saw something that they did, a lot of times how I'll approach them is, why did you do it this way? Because I want to see if there's a rationale. Maybe there's something they know that I am unaware of. While I want you to learn from my experience, I oftentimes find that I learn from students similarly. And so I want to be able to listen to them, hear what they have to say, and then if they don't give me a reason as to why, then I'll begin to implement that feedback and that critique. But we want to understand how they prefer to be critiqued along the way, and then we will meet them where they are.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. Our next question is for Sierra. If I'm struggling at an outplacement, what resources are available, and how might an extern handle this?
Great question, because as students, we may find ourselves in outplacements that we thought we would excel in and have such a great time in, and then we get there and we realize it's something that maybe we are not super interested in, or it's a little more difficult than we thought it was going to be. And there's a lot of navigating new territory and a lot of new material that we're trying to learn, and sometimes it can just feel like we're struggling and we're drowning, and then it's like, where do we go from here? One good resource is to always reach out to your program director at your university and let them know, be open and honest with them and let them know, hey, I'm struggling, I'm having a really hard time. Is there any maybe advice you could give me, or can we sit down and chat? Maybe if there's a um, chance to maybe outside of externships, maybe you're just at like a second or third year outpatient or outplacement rotation. Maybe there's a chance to switch if that's a possibility. With externship, typically you're set in that externship for the entire year, unless there's already been an agreement at the beginning where you do half of your year maybe during a clinical externship, and then the other half of your year it's a little more research focused. If there's any opportunity to maybe switch locations, or if you're having a really hard time having a really good connection with your preceptor, something along those lines, it's always good to just have that open and honest communication, and just be honest and let your clinical director or your program director of your university program, let them know, hey, I'm struggling a little bit. If you're not able to get in contact with them, you can always reach out to the externship coordinator for that specific location if it's different than the main preceptor. If it's the same person or it's a different person, just let them know, hey, I'm struggling. We want to help you. We want to see you succeed. That's what we're here for. We want you to come to us and let us know that there's maybe a specific aspect or a few specific aspects that you're struggling in, and we can provide you with that help and support. Maybe we can take a few steps back and go back to the basics to learn a few more things or kind of refresh our skills in certain areas before we're kind of jumping in and giving you more independence. It's okay to struggle, because during externship, I always like to say you're a sponge. You're soaking up so much information. And sometimes it can just get to the point where it's like there's so much, and I feel like I'm getting lost in the material. Take a step back and communicate with us like, hey, can we just maybe review some things a few more times before I have more independence with that? And that is what your preceptors are there for. They want to help you.
Thank you so much, Sierra. And now I'll pass it on to Katie. Are there any questions for the panel?
So I feel like I've gotten this question from classmates. We got this in some previous pre-questions. What advice do you have for students when they're entering maybe a more fast-paced clinical environment than they're used to? So would anyone on the panel like to take this question?
Well, I'll take that. Working in a very fast-paced clinic. Um, we always look, it gets back to what Sierra was saying, we want our students to succeed. So, we may be moving boom, 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 boom. We take time after each patient to at least do a brief debrief. How did that particular session go? Things that maybe the student observed, things that I observed. And when it comes to, typically if a student has taken the lead on a patient, they're also going to write the report on that patient. But, if I've got 12 patients scheduled in a day, it's unreasonable for a student to write 12 reports. So, maybe the student will see patient one, I see patient two, and, we alternate that way. And just figuring, and, again, students being honest, saying, you know what, I just need 5 minutes to go to the bathroom or get a drink of water or, things like that. And, we all need a break sometimes. Really just kind of taking it for what it's worth, wearing comfortable shoes, and, just embracing it to a good extent.
I love that. I second the comfortable shoes, but maybe they have a shoe dress code. Pay attention to that. So kind of our last question we'll ask to wrap up this section is particularly for sites that have co-externs. I feel like co-externs are such a great resource. They can provide friendship, camaraderie, someone else you're going through this experience with. But for a lot of students, it can also maybe be a source of kind of nerves, in the sense of some students might feel like they have less or different experience with their co-externs. So what advice would you give students if they might feel like they have less or different clinical experience than their co-externs? Would anyone like to take this question?
Yeah, I'll take it. Especially teaching at two different universities, I get to see which area each university is quite proficient in. And this year, coming starting in May, end of May, we will have two externs from two different universities. And the first thing we tell them on the first day is number one, this is not a competition. We want good colleagues. So we're here to make good colleagues. That's it. That's what we're here for. And two, learn from one another. So one school we're taking from is very hearing aid heavy, and they are very ready for hearing aids. Another school is very focused on the pediatric side that we're taking. So in those cases, I want to make sure that they are learning from one another, putting them in the same room, learning together, but emphasizing the fact this is not a competition. We are here to create good colleagues.
Thank you so much. We will now take the remaining time to try and answer any questions that were not covered so far. So our first question that we have, this was put in the Q&A box. They said that they often see on Facebook audiology groups that people are scrambling to find externships due to their placement falling through. And they asked if the panel had any insight on as to why this happens and any advice for what to look for when applying and interviewing.
Well, I know one reason it does, especially in again the major medical centers, and Jonathan can speak to more of a private practice setting. Um, we are required to have a legal contract between the hospital and the university, and it says everything from, who covers if there's a malpractice situation, what happens if the student falls and gets hurt, who is responsible for that. It covers really everything. And although we have to have those contracts, it's sort of out of my hands. It goes between lawyer and lawyer, and lawyers can never agree on wording, and they always want to change things. And we are required to work with the hospital's contract, which also says that everything is bound by Massachusetts law. But if somebody's coming from, say, the University of Iowa, Iowa won't agree to Massachusetts law. And so then the lawyers all have to agree. So sometimes, and that's why, most places are interviewing externs in the fall to start in the spring, because that legal process can take forever. So sometimes the two sides just can't come to agreement. And that would be one reason that a student placement might fall through. I think the other reason, certainly, people get sick. Maybe there's one person in a clinic who has just suddenly come down with a catastrophic illness, or someone in their family, and they have to take leave and can no longer supervise the student as much as they had intended to. So, those kinds of things do come up. I think it's rare. It's unfortunate when it happens, but I think the other thing that I've seen on some of those Facebook pages is a lot of other people. And again, this gets back to the fact that there are more externship sites than there are students looking for an externship. There are other people who have jumped in and said, you know what, we didn't get an extern this year. I'd love to have you come and work with us. So I think even those students that maybe for a couple of weeks are sort of like, oh my God, what am I going to do? Typically fall into something that, hopefully is a really good learning experience for them.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mullen. I feel like that's great advice of like, okay, obviously we don't want that to happen, but knowing that for many students, I know a number of students, or not a number, but I've heard of students that they're able to find another externship even after like something that happened. So staying calm, staying positive, working with your university, because you're not the first person this might have happened to. So I think understanding like you're going to be okay. There are other externships still available, as Dr. Mullen said. So really taking a step back. I think that's great advice.
Yeah, and
So
one thing, oh,
yeah,
excuse me, Kitty. One thing I would add too is the Audiology Clinical Education Network that does keep a list. The current things that are up there are now older from last year. And as of May 1st, any clinic that's voluntarily participating in ACEN will then upload all their new information for the upcoming season. But what happens at the end is if a clinic still has an opening, that actually gets prominently posted on the website. So if a student finds that something fell through, they can then go back through and say, okay, this is a geographical area that I can be in, and I see that there are these clinics that have openings, and then can reach out to them too. So there's lots of ways to, hopefully still land something.
Great advice, Dr. Mullen. So, our next question, I feel like Sierra would be a great fit for this, maybe being our most recent graduate. What advice do you have for students navigating work-life balance during their externship, and how might this look a little different than during our other years of grad school?
I am so happy to take this question because when I was doing my graduate program, my first, second, and third years of my graduate studies, I was able to hold a few part-time jobs. And then externship year came, and that was completely changed for me because it was 40 hours, 5 days a week. And it was a very, very busy life that it was a big transition going from being a student, being in clinical rotations and classrooms, and kind of having a little bit more of like a set schedule, but a little more flexibility to maybe take on maybe a part-time job of like dog walking or something like that, compared to you will be in the clinic 40 hours a week, 5 days a week. It was a very big transition. Um, that's where stipends and compensation can kind of come into play if you're looking to have a little extra bit of financial help during the externship year. I was grateful that my externship did provide compensation, so I was able to not have to do any type of part-time jobs or balance any type of work-life balance during the externship process or during the externship year. Um, when it comes to navigating that work-life balance, enjoy your weekends, enjoy your time away from audiology. Audiology is such a big aspect of who you are and what you want to be. But it's okay to take a step back from that. When I entered my externship year, I told myself Saturdays are not for audiology. Saturdays are for me. Saturdays are for doing what I love outside of audiology. And then Sundays were getting ready for my week. So there's a lot of change that comes with the externship year in trying to figure out not only how are you starting to navigate that change in role from student to clinician, where you're starting to experience more of that clinician-based lifestyle, while also trying to figure out outside of that student life, what do you really enjoy? Maybe you didn't get to explore a lot of your passions and interests while you were doing a lot of your studies because so much of your focus was on your studies. So I encourage you as a student and as an extern to not only put a lot of your interest into audiology, but to also try to find a little bit of time outside of audiology to explore the things that you didn't maybe get to explore while you were in the midst of your program.
I feel like, Sierra, you've kind of teed us up for a great note to end on. So we're kind of going to do a final whole panel question. So we've learned a lot tonight. We've gotten a lot of great information from so many amazing professionals. But okay, we're all going to give one final reflection. If you could go back and tell yourself something before or during your externship, what would it be? Or what's kind of your like golden advice you have for students? So, would anyone like to start with this question?
I can start. One thing that I continue to tell myself during my externship process is there's so much information, and I mentioned this before, soak it all up like a sponge and take as many things as you can, even if it's just you're doing another just regular conventional audiometry test. There's so many things you can learn from every single patient and so many things you can add to your audiology toolkit that could benefit you so much down the line. So just take everything in.
Yeah, and I would say reach out, to any other opportunities that may come up. We've kind of talked about this before, maybe all of a sudden there's, an implant surgery and you've never seen surgery before. And, that may not be a direction that you're heading, but go ahead and take that opportunity. We have a fabulous outreach program through our Deaf and Hard of Hearing program that provides a lot of community programming for families of deaf and hard of hearing children. And so, sometimes our externs will take the opportunity to volunteer at an apple picking event or something like that as just an opportunity to spend time with kids outside of the clinic. So, look for those opportunities and capitalize on them when you can.
I would say the externship year for me was just another box to check, and that wasn't the way to go about it. Audiology is this beautiful blend of medicine and technology combining together. And what I would suggest you do, based on what everyone else has said, is you've done the hard work. You clearly want to be here, but now go out and find your passion. Use this year to find your passion, whatever niche part of audiology that is, because it kills me when I hear audiologists say, I'm getting burnt out, I'm getting burnt out. Find that passion. I am not good with work-life balance. I love what I do though. So it makes it really, really hard to want to do anything else because I love what I do so much. So utilize this year as the year that you get to find your passion in audiology.
That was very inspiring. Jonathan, and mine is going to be a more like practical advice of, for the love of God, enter your hours on time and early. I was an extern and I graduated in 2009, and this was before Typhon and Calypso, I think is the other one. And I had this awful spreadsheet and was on the phone, no doubt, a week before graduation with my clinical coordinator asking, what about these hours? What are you doing here? So even though you want to be fully immersed and soak up everything in your externship, don't forget about some of the things that you still need to do for your university and make sure that you're entering your hours and accounting for your hours and creating those systems so that you don't let those things fall through the cracks.
I love that. We need to keep track of that hard work we're doing. We don't want to trip right at the finish line. So thank you all so much for that amazing advice. And I think we're going to wrap up our evening now. So thank you all for a great night.
Yes, thank you all so much for joining us tonight. We hope you feel more prepared into entering this exciting next step on your way to becoming an audiologist. Our panelists have generously offered to share their contact info in case you'd like to follow up with them individually, and we'll post that information in just a moment. We're about to post two important links in the chat. One is a quick survey so you can give us feedback about this event. The other is a special link to the NISLA blog, which will show you all the posts we have related to audiology externship application process.
On our next slide, we have a look at some of National NISLA's remaining spring virtual programming. Please see our virtual events page to learn a little more. The 2026 ASHA Virtual Career Fairs for Audiology is May 6th. More information is available at the link in the chat.
The National NISLA Honors Program is open right now and closes March 31st, which is this upcoming Tuesday. It is one of the many benefits of being a National NISLA member. Apply to be recognized yourself or recognize a peer or advisor. National NISLA student leadership positions are also open until May 3rd. This is a great way for students to hone their leadership skills while growing their networks of colleagues and professionals. For more information, you can click on the link in the chat. And remember that if you are in the class of 2026 or 2027, holding 2026 National NISLA membership is necessary for the NISLA to ASHA conversion discount. On behalf of National NISLA, we'd like to thank our panelists for offering their time and expertise. If you'd like to connect with any of our panelists, Katie or myself, feel free to screenshot this slide. This has been a wonderful discussion, and we'd appreciate your feedback. It's only with the help of our dedicated members that the CSD community continues to thrive. This conversation has been recorded and will be posted on National NISLA's social media accounts. Thank you and have a great night.